So I've got some ideas about the Kennedy assassination. You know how Jim Garrison found that there was a massive conspiracy to assassinate JFK? The conspiracy was so huge and so secretive that it was necessary to throw out all logic to discover it, because any logic will be hidden by the conspiracy. He discovered it by finding coincidences and links, which were signs that the conspiracy existed. It's pointless to understand hidden meanings of a conspiracy that big. Meaning is hidden by the secret rulers of the world. Well, in 1963, Principia Discordia, the foundational text of the new religion, Discordianism, was printed on Jim Garrison's Xerox machine. A year before this, one of the authors of the text, Carrie Wendell Thornley, wrote The Idle Warriors, whose protagonist was Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, this was a year before Kennedy was assassinated. Thornley, Garrison, and Oswald all lived in New Orleans prior to the assassination. Now, call me crazy, but there seem to be too many connections there. There's gotta be something to it. I think there may be an even bigger conspiracy than Jim Garrison thought. You see, New Orleans was founded in 1718, 200 years before the influenza outbreak, and 2 years later, Jim Garrison would have been born in Denison, Iowa. Just a year prior to the influenza outbreak, a boy would be born in Brookline, Massachusetts. It was JFK. He was born on May 29, 1973, 4 years, 5 months, and 22 days before the birth of Jim Garrison, and 1,402 miles away from each other. 4 plus 5 equals 9, which is just 2 away from 11. 1122, the day Kennedy would be slain in Dallas, Texas, which is 492 miles away from New Orleans. That has to be more than a coincidence. New Orleans businessman Clay Shaw has always been a connection to the Kennedy assassination, but has anyone ever told you about his former business partner, Thomas H. Wyman? Well, Thomas H. Wyman lived in Dallas in 1963, renting out an apartment near the Grassy Knoll. You know, that Grassy Knoll. Thomas H. Wyman would later become a Harvard professor and take on high positions for various companies such as CBS, General Motors, and Green Giant. Thomas H. Wyman was notoriously known for stepping down as CEO of CBS in 1975. But does anyone find it a bit strange that he would do this immediately after the release of the Zapruder film to the world? He would later hide from the public eye as professor for Harvard. One former Harvard alumni spoke about Wyman in a 2003 Newgrounds forum post. He taught us black magic and said the government builds more tunnels than you could ever imagine. You know what sounds like black magic? Trapping people's souls with violins. Rumor has it that Niccolo Paganini did. Paganini was alive during the 18th and 19th centuries in Italy, and he wrote some of the most celebrated pieces ever made for the violin. He was one of the most celebrated violin virtuosos of all time, but do you know how he achieved that? You guessed it. He was in league with the devil. Some say that he made a deal with the devil, and others say that he was the devil himself. But if he was trapping souls within violins, it has to be one of those. 6 years before Paganini's birth, an interesting development was happening in Bavaria. On the 1st of May in 1776, a secret society known as the Illuminati was founded with the goals of opposing superstition, religious influence over public life, and abuses of state power. These goals were all a ruse. In 1785, the Illuminati officially disbanded, otherwise known as going behind the scenes. Of course, we know from the conservative elites at the time that they were still very active years later, having started the French Revolution. In fact, we know that they are still running things behind the scenes today, as they are responsible for every political assassination since their founding. We know this because of Discordianism. As previously mentioned, the founding text of the Discordian religion was first printed in 1963. The Discordian religion worships Eris, the Greek goddess of discord. Before the Trojan War, the Greek gods were all having a party for the wedding of Laius and Thetis, and Eris was invited. In Discordianism, this is known as the original snub. In response, Eris created a golden apple with the word Callisti written on it, or for the prettiest. There was debate over whether this golden apple was made of metallic gold or Acapulco gold. But what is known as the argument over who the apple was meant for sparked the Trojan War. This apple was known as the Apple of Discord and became a central symbol for Discordians. Discordians believe that the world is created from both chaos and order, or as they call them, eristic and anaristic principles. Another core tenet of Discordianism is that both eristic and anaristic principles are both true and illusionary. In essence, everything is both true and false. They use this belief to point out the ridiculousness of anyone believing full-heartedly in anything, primarily aiming to focus on conspiracy theories. In 1968, in order to break people out of the conspiracy theory mindsets, they launched Operation Mindfuck, which was an attempt to spread the belief that the Illuminati were responsible for all political assassinations and were secretly running the world. The idea that a long-dead secret society from 18th century Bavaria would be running things from behind the scenes was seen as being so ridiculous that it would awaken people to how much uncritical belief influences the way we think. Maybe the connections are no more than mere coincidence. Maybe there is too much chaos in the world to be able to make meaningful connections that point to conspiracies. Maybe I've been too gullible and uncritically spouting this nonsense. No, I think not. As we discussed before, one of the founders of Discordianism had connections to the Kennedy assassination, so he's part of the conspiracy. How convenient that his religion would be attempting to persuade people away from the conspiracy that he was a part of. And what better way to hide a conspiracy than to use an underground tunnel system that spans across Texas to Minnesota? During my research, I became obsessed with the idea of locations and distances to each other. Why were all these numbers aligning? I began traveling to Denison, Iowa to find the exact coordinates of Jim Garrison's birthplace when I noticed I was being followed. Not just by one vehicle, but multiple. And they tried to fool me with their disguises, but I knew. I made the quick decision of throwing them off by driving my car into the ditch, waiting for hours on a silent road until I felt safe to leave. Arriving back to civilization, I became shocked at the realization of where it was, Blue Earth, Minnesota, the site of one of the most hidden conspiracies that would ever exist. About 3 years ago, I was at a bar in my hometown when a guy told me about the tunnels and communications array leading to Saturn, all located within Blue Earth. I knew right then and there that this man was telling me the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I never saw the man again, probably because he was silent shortly afterwards. I was standing above what I believed to be one of those tunnels. It was a statue of the Green Giant, the same company once owned by Thomas H. Wyman. The loss of his friend and former business partner, Clay Shaw, would lead to an empty hole in his heart, which would need to be filled with tunnels. As you can see in this photo, Thomas H. Wyman and two other men who I can only assume are government officials appear to be exploring the recent construction of the tunnel. Upon arriving at the site of the Green Giant statue, I needed to find the entrance to the tunnels. Conveniently, there was a small barn 100 feet away from the statue. The barn had a lock, so it must have been the secret entrance I was looking for. I didn't have bolt cutters, so I made a blueprint of it. See? Still not convinced? Well, if you look at the site from a satellite image, you can see a walking path carrying the lowercase y. And what's inside that y? The statue of a man. Y-Man. Thomas H. Wyman.